Welcome. Thanks for being here. My name's Fiona Wilson, and I'm the Executive Director of UNH's Center for Social Innovation and Enterprise. We're a joint program between the Paul College of Business and Economics and the Carsey School of Public Policy here at UNH. We really focus on the intersection of how to use business models and public policy as tools for advancing social and environmental challenges in the world. So we couldn't be more thrilled to be hosting this event this afternoon. I'm going to hand over to our provost, Dr. Nancy Targett, who would love to share a few words of welcome with you on behalf of the University of New Hampshire.
So welcome. I'm really delighted to see so many of you here today. It's really an exciting event for the University of New Hampshire to be highlighting the role of large corporations in advancing sustainability. It's great to see the large audience that's here, but even though I'm relatively new, only been here about 6 months, I'm not really surprised to see all of you here because I know that sustainability is one of the pillars of this institution, and I know that it's something that many, many individuals across all sectors here have a commitment to. And I think many of you know that UNH's Sustainability Institute is the oldest endowed sustainability program in higher education in the United States, and that sustainability is one of our 6 visions and values that are part of the UNH 2020 strategic plan. And when you think about it at UNH, we don't just talk the talk, we try to walk the walk, we try to show it, and one of the ways that we do that is through the most comprehensive and respected ranking of campus sustainability. That's the STARS program, the Sustainability Tracking Assessment and Rating System, STARS. You probably know, I hope you know, that UNH has achieved a gold rating since STARS began in 2010, and that puts us in the top 5% for campus sustainability. UNH also is not content to just sit back on its laurels. It wants to continue to be an innovator and a leader in sustainability. And right now, I can tell you that UNH is preparing for its STAR certification renewal. And this time, we hope in the summer to go for platinum status. And we would be only the #2 university in the country to get platinum status. We offer a sustainability curriculum through the new Sustainability Dual Major. We're leaders in renewable energy. Our Ecoline landfill gas-to-energy project supplies up to 85% of our campus energy needs. And our greenhouse gas reduction is much higher than the average campus that you would find in the nation. So I think we're 36% to 5%. Additionally, and kind of related to the event of tonight is in 2016, President Huddleston convened a zero waste task force at UNH to consider how the university could move towards innovative practices and reduce contributions to landfills, how we could eliminate waste. And that was actually done at the urging of a UNH alumnus, Alex Freed, who I know is here tonight and is the executive director of the Plan. And so individuals really can make a difference when they talk to folks at institutions and get us thinking about how we can even take our sustainability commitment to the next level. The first initiative in the Zero Waste program was the new Wildcat Stadium that came online in the fall. That was opened as a zero waste facility. And I guess I would say that at UNH, sustainability is a value and vision that sort of unites all of us, whether we're faculty, staff, students. It's a common thread that runs through the institution. And so I think that's one of the reasons that makes it particularly fitting for us to host this event here. I also know that the corporate leaders that you're going to hear from tonight are sharing this vision. And it's actually an excellent opportunity for us at UNH to learn from some of the most environmentally innovative companies in America. And we're really excited that they can join us here. I know that in today's world, it's really easy to vilify corporations for their contributions to environmental degradation. And it's true, some do contribute to that. But more often now, what we are seeing is a major shift in what's happening in corporate America and around the world. And leading companies like the ones we're going to hear from tonight, Patagonia, Timberland, Eileen Fisher, W.L. Gore, and others, are innovating to ensure a lighter footprint on the earth through how they work with suppliers, looking at the types of materials that they're using in their products, actively thinking about the whole product life cycle, and also thinking about how to extend the life of their products. And actually, in celebration of that, I pulled out a suit of mine that I've had for 20 years. So I'm not really... And also, I think really importantly, is thinking about how we ultimately dispose of all this stuff and what can we do to extend the life of that. So, and I think the other aspect of this is what's really exciting is that these companies are not sacrificing profitability to do this. So what they're finding is that they can improve their financial bottom line through their environmental initiatives, and at the same time, they're building stronger trust with their customer base, they're building brand loyalty. And so I think these companies embody the idea of what businesses can be, that they can be agents for positive change in our world. And I'm really looking forward to the comments that we're going to hear tonight, the discussion and the comments on this initiative. So with that, I will say thank you and welcome.
So thank you so much, Dr. Targett. She mentioned Alex Freed, and I'm really excited to bring that gentleman up to the stage. Alex is a 2013 graduate of the College of Liberal Arts here at the University of New Hampshire. When he was a student here, he was the founder of UNH's Trash to Treasure program that really is reducing the amount of waste here on campus. In 2013, he also won our very first Social Venture Innovation Challenge and has gone on in the last 4 years to build his own national nonprofit organization called the Post Landfill Action Network. Through PLAN, we call it PLAN, he has been replicating the Trash to Treasure model that he pioneered here at UNH on over 110 college campuses around the country. So a big round of applause for our very own Alex Freed.
But thank you all for coming. I'm super excited to be here. We are on stop 9 of a 21-stop tour around the country with Patagonia, which has been a lot of fun. So basically, we're on the Patagonia Worn Wear College tour. We were asked by Patagonia to select 21 campuses that are exemplary leaders in the zero waste movement and in sustainability metrics. So kudos to UNH for being selected for this tour. It did not just have to do with the fact that I was an alumni, although it made these relationships and the opportunity to do this event a lot easier. But we've been working with 21 campuses around the country to host events like this, the repair fair that we did today, bringing together other B Corps leaders and other local businesses and student organizations to celebrate the repair and reuse movement. And it's been a really exciting journey for us. I only graduated UNH less than 4 years ago. To go from being a very small student-led effort on a college campus to now leading an organization that works with over 100 campuses across the country on these efforts, and to be partnering with major companies and doing this pretty exciting initiative. So I have a lot of people to thank that I do not have time to go through that list right now, but almost half of this room in some way or another has been influential and impactful in the growth of this organization. So it's really kind of cool to be at my hometown university hosting this event. I just want to say thank you to the UNH community for having us and for letting us do this event. I'm going to stop there and introduce our speaker tonight, Vincent Stanley. I'm going to read his bio. Vincent Stanley is the co-author with Yvon Chouinard of The Responsible Company, and has been with Patagonia on and off since its beginning in 1973. For many of those years in key executive roles as head of sales or marketing. More informally, he is Patagonia's longtime chief storyteller. Vincent helped develop the Footprint Chronicles, the company's interactive website that outlines the social and environmental impact of its products, the Common Threads Partnership, and Patagonia Books. He currently serves as the company's director of philosophy, which is awesome because I was a philosophy major at UNH, and is a visiting fellow at the Yale School of Management. He is also a poet whose work has appeared in Best American Poetry. He and his wife, the writer Nora Gallagher, live in Santa Barbara. Without further ado, I'm honored to welcome Vincent to the stage.
Thank you for coming, and thanks to UNH for having us here. I think it was a great event today. We had a lot of people down there. I want to talk a little bit about, I want to tell one story from our history that I think really helped put us on the path we've been on the last 20 or so years. And I also want to talk a little bit about the major challenges we see for ourselves and for business over the next 20 or 25 years, which will also be, for the younger people in the room, the challenges of your working life or the first half of your working life. I'm conscious whenever I speak to people I don't know that I want to be of use to you. So I'm going to try to put my comments in a very large context. And I'd like to start with a couple of quotes. And the first is from Ernest Hemingway from Sun Also Rises. And one character asks another, he says, "Mike, how did you go bankrupt?" And Mike says, "In two ways, slowly, then suddenly." And the second quote is from Aldo Leopold, who was the first great land management scientist and conservationist, who said, "A thing is right when it tends to support the stability, integrity, and beauty of the biotic community. And a thing is wrong when it tends otherwise." And I think this quote is so instinctually correct. It's something we all really know to be true. But in our working lives, in our productive lives, almost everything we do tends to disrupt the integrity, stability, and beauty of the biotic community, which includes human beings. One of the things that we discovered along the way at Patagonia is that everything we make, no matter what we do, takes back more from the planet than we can return. And that's, I think, the primary reason we have Delia the Warnware truck going around to 21 different cities, is to create between the customer and ourselves an understanding of a different relationship to things that we make and things that we buy. Understanding that everything is very costly. And to create a new relationship that's based on the experience we have with a product rather than merely buying it. So I have to say, I've heard from 2 or 3 kind people today who mentioned that responsibility was in Patagonia's DNA. And I'd have to say that it was not. There was a certain kind of responsibility that it was in our DNA, and I think that's because we came out of the climbing equipment world. So there was an understanding, there was never, oh, we're going to make good, better, best climbing equipment, because people's lives depended on the quality of our climbing gear, and the world of climbing was so small that you were selling to a friend of a friend, or a friend of a friend of a friend. There was 3 degrees of separation and no more. So I used to inspect ice axes sitting in a corner of the courtyard for inspecting ice axes for hairline fractures. And I had this immense sense of responsibility that someone could get hurt. So that sense followed us into Chouinard Equipment, and it followed us into Patagonia. But as for the rest of it, did we have a sense of environmental responsibility? No. Did we believe that we could influence anything in the supply chain on how our products were made? No, we had no idea. So that's why I wanted to tell you this story of our conversion to organic cotton. And it's rather old history now, but the details, I think, are significant for people who are going to undertake this kind of work for the future. So we were rolling along as a business, growing at a very rapid pace in the late 1980s, not quite sure what we were going to be when we grew up as a company. We opened up our third store in Boston, and after 3 days, employees started to call in sick with headaches and stomach aches. So we closed the store down, and we called in a ventilation engineer. He fixed the problem. We said, thanks, but what caused this? He said, oh, that was from the formaldehyde off-gassing from the cotton clothes stored in your basement. So we'd been in business for, Yvon had been in business for 30 years. We dealt with steel, we had dealt with aluminum. We knew that half our line came out of an oil well in the form of nylon or polyester. But we had thought of cotton as this benign natural fiber that was not a big problem. But when we heard our employees were being poisoned, we actually commissioned a study of the 4 major fibers we used, wool, nylon, polyester, and cotton. And we found out that cotton was by far the most harmful. And not because of the formaldehyde finish, which in a stable environment was not the major culprit, but because of the intense use of chemicals in the cultivation of cotton. So something like 25% of all the pesticides used in the world on agricultural land were used on cotton, which constituted 8% of arable land. So we went through a lot of soul searching. We had made a switch 15 years earlier from one kind of climbing equipment to another, from pitons to chocks, because we had discovered that the pitons caused some harm. So we had developed an alternative. We searched one out. We took some risks. And with cotton, we asked ourselves the same question: is there an alternative to cotton grown in this way? And we found out there was, that organic cotton was still being grown in California and Texas and China and Turkey. We experimented, and then we decided, a lot of companies then were creating eco programs. They would take part of their line and create an organic cotton line, but it was a small part of the business. And we decided, no, this stuff is bad. We're going to change the entire line to organic cotton, and we're going to do it in 1.5 years. And we contracted with farmers in the San Joaquin Valley. We bought most of the production that year. We prayed for rain. And we thought we had done our homework, and we had, but not enough homework. Because what we discovered when we bought the cotton from the farmers, we severed our relationship to the industrial supply chain. And the farmers had no relationship with the spinners who actually turn the fiber into yarn, and so on to the knitting and the weaving. And when we went to spinners, they said, we hate organic cotton. We don't want to work with this stuff. It gums up our machines. It's sticky. Then we had a problem with our employees. So the people in design and production are going, okay, I got to do the same thing I did last season. I have to design the line. I have to color it. I have to do the specs, order the samples, visit all the customers. And by the way, you want me to find an entirely new infrastructure for creating sportswear on top of my normal work. And we're going to have to raise the price $3 to $5 for every shirt, pants, and shorts we make. And there isn't a customer in the world who has asked for this. But the people who had been working on this issue were increasingly convinced of the problem and that organic would provide a significant solution. And so what we ended up doing is we ended up renting buses and taking employees, 40 at a time, to the San Joaquin Valley, and we would take employees to a conventional cotton farm and then to an organic farm. The first thing you noticed when the bus pulled up to the conventional farm was the smell. Because organophosphates were initially developed as nerve gases for World War I, and they smell that way. The second thing is you notice that in this cotton field there were no birds anywhere nearby. And the third thing you notice is if you dug your hand in the soil, not only were there no worms, and it takes worms 3 years to come back after those pesticides are no longer used, there was no life. There was no vegetable matter. And basically, we were growing cotton, or the cotton being used in Patagonia clothes, was grown in dead soil, held mechanically in place, and fed fertilizers. And if it hadn't been fed those fertilizers, nothing would have grown. So everybody who came back from these trips, nobody ever came back saying, this isn't worth it. Everybody came back saying, this is a pain, but this is worthwhile. This is something we're going to help make happen. And this, I think, was a fundamental transformation for the company, because it created in the culture this desire to do the right thing and also not to shy away from a really difficult problem, but to meet a difficult problem head on and then find a solution. And I think almost everything we've done since then would not have been possible if we hadn't made that change. There's one other short story I want to tell, which just to illustrate how dumb we were. We, because we were made up initially of a band of climbers and surfers largely. And we loved the other value that the company had besides making quality gear was this love of wild places. If you're a climber and you're a mile from the road, your relationship to the world changes absolutely. Because all of a sudden you're no longer at the top of the food chain, you're vulnerable to weather. You in New Hampshire know this better than most. You're at the same time self-reliant, more self-reliant, and at the same time more humble. So, and if you've had this experience, it's hard to explain to someone who hasn't, but if you have, it creates a strong bond among those who have had that, and also it creates a strong desire to protect the natural world, or protect the places where you have this experience. But basically, our idea of nature was where we went to play. And I don't think we had an underlying sense of nature as a biotic community, as the underlying system that supports the whole system of life, the whole web of life. And that came about, and I'll tell this very briefly. The Army Corps of Engineers came to our town in 1974. We had a little river that ran down from the mountains and met the ocean at the river mouth right near our headquarters. And the Army Corps said, we're going to do you a favor and we're going to declare this river dead because it has no value to the community. And if we encase it in concrete, you'll never have flooding. The only reason we cared is we were worried about a surf break and what the effect might have. And the things were going swimmingly for the Army until about 5 minutes at the end of the presentation, a 25-year-old biology student got up with a series of 25 slides of different species of life that depended on this river. And the last was of a steelhead smolt. And this had been a major steelhead river in the beginning of the 20th to the middle of the 20th century. So that was what we did. We left that meeting, and the city council also changed its mind. And what we came out from that meeting was the sense, no, you don't kill this river. What we need to do is to restore it and bring it back to life. So we gave this 25-year-old student a desk, a mailbox, and a telephone. And that became the basis for our environmental giving. When we started giving to grassroots and environmental organizations in 1986, that was our prototype of someone very small, passionate, committed to local landscape. want to talk a little bit about what we see 20 years after converting to organic cotton. What we see are our major challenges. And I'm going to share them with you. I don't know that all businesses will see, I know that all businesses will not see this as their major challenges, but I've prepared them as a kind of Letterman list in reverse order of difficulty for Patagonia. And the first is, how do we increase our activism? How do we expand it to talk about environmental justice? As we grow larger, which we have been growing larger, how do we expand this grassroots environmental program? And the reason it's the easiest for us is that we're all into it. It doesn't present a huge problem for our culture or our organization. The second is regenerative agriculture. And of all the 6 major elements of the environmental crisis, from the 6th extinction crisis to climate change to water pollution to ocean acidification to chemical proliferation, the one that we can do the most to influence now is soil health. And we're losing, it takes a century for 1 inch of topsoil to grow. But with human intervention, using natural methods, you can actually speed that process up. If you reduce tillage or stop tilling land, if you let the land be healthy enough for microorganisms to grow at a very deep level, use very deep-rooted plants, there's a lot of evidence now that we can sequester a lot of the carbon that the oceans can no longer absorb because they're turning acid, and that the rainforest can no longer absorb because we've shut them down. And that's behind our Patagonia Provisions, our food company. This is at the very heart of that, to pursue regenerative organic agriculture that actually brings the soil back to health. The third one is measurement. And I think when we talk on the panel, we have people who know a lot more about this. But it's not just what you measure matters. It's also, how do you choose what matters? And this is not something that a lot of companies, this is something companies are beginning to know how to do, but nobody was measuring these things before 20 or 25 years ago. The next is reducing chemical impact. And there are 62,000 chemicals that we've introduced, industrial chemicals that we've introduced since the mid-19th century. And about several hundred of them have been examined by the EPA. So for us as a company to work further to investigate and then to reduce the chemical use is really important. The next one is one specific to us. It's microplastics. And we make fleece, and fleece sheds microfibers. And if you have a front-load washer, that washer filters it out. Or if you're in a city that has a good urban filtration system, they'll filter it out. But if not, it ends up in the river, and then it ends up in the ocean, and it ends up in the stomach of seabirds. So we're partnering with University of California, Santa Barbara Brand School, and with North Carolina State to investigate exactly what the source of the problem is and how that can be solved. Another one that relates directly to us is animal welfare. What are 21st century standards for treating animals humanely that are being raised eventually to be slaughtered for food? Living wage. This is something that the apparel industry has never paid. The apparel industry, as some of you know, is often the first industry to come to an area that gains railroads and a port and an airport. And it is a low value, considered low value industry. So it's often one of the first to move out when higher value factories come in. Workers have never been paid a living wage in the 200 years that sewing has been a major industry. We're engaged now in a program called Fair Trade Certified that is a step to that, in which we pay a bonus in escrow to the workers in a factory who then vote on how to take that bonus. These get more difficult as the list goes on. We get to fossil fuels. How will Patagonia disengage itself from fossil fuel use between now and 2050? How do we reduce our overall impact if we continue to be a growing company? Not reduce it as a percentage of our business, but reduce the actual impact as we grow. And then the last is, how do we live within the planetary boundaries that were defined in Stockholm about 15 years ago? There are about 9 of them, and I think we're on the verge of crossing several and have crossed a few. So how does Patagonia, and what influence do we have with other companies and with industry as a whole to help everyone and ourselves live within our means? This is daunting work, and it has been daunting work for us from the beginning of the company, but also significantly for the last 20 years. We're doing things that have not been done, and we're not geniuses, so it takes a while to figure out what can be done. But I can tell you from a perspective of 44 years that the one thing it always is very meaningful work. And one of the things I think about when I'm talking to people who are younger, who are starting out, if you're starting out now and you work as long as I have now, say 2050 or 2055, I think that the environmental and the social challenges that we have now will eventually become, for any kind of business you're in, will become the central challenges because they're so big. And while that is daunting, it also guarantees all of us who are engaged in that work a considerable sense of value, community, and connection to that biotic community. So, thank you.
So obviously you've already met Vincent, but I also want to introduce our other panelists. So we have Colleen Veen, who is the Director of Sustainability at Timberland. Give them a wave, Colleen. Thank you. So thrilled to have Timberland here. They're obviously right here in our backyard, and it's always a pleasure. We partner with Timberland in many ways, and they support the university in many ways. So thanks for being back here again today. Amy Hall, who is the Director of Social Consciousness for Eileen Fisher. Stuart Shepard, who is on the Fabric Sustainability team for WL Gore and Associates, otherwise Gore-Tex. And by no means least, but last, Betsy Blaisdell. She's the Vice President of Product for the Sustainable Apparel Coalition. So all of these companies up here tonight are members of the Sustainable Apparel Coalition, and I wanted to start with Betsy to just tell us a little bit about what is the Sustainable Apparel Coalition.
Sure. So hi, everybody. I first want to say I'm a UNH alum, and I'm really excited to be back here with you all. Thank you. Having said that, I'll tell you a little bit more about the Sustainable Apparel Coalition. It's essentially a trade association founded by what many might seem an unholy alliance between Walmart and Patagonia back in 2009. Yes, it is kind of funny that these two sat down and actually talked at a table together.
It was the one time that one letter issued on joint stationery of Walmart and Patagonia was the invitation to the first Sustainable Apparel Coalition.
And I received that letter when I was at Timberland, leading sustainability many years ago, and I think all of our eyes popped like, what is going on? What alternative universe are we in? But it was really recognizing that to find solutions to the industry's challenge around sustainability, both environmental and social, meant having these unholy alliances because we all share a common supply chain. And so now we have more than 200 members, and the association is focused on transforming the industry from one that has a negative impact to actual positive impact. We have absolutely no idea how we're going to achieve that as an industry, but our starting point is evaluating how our factories and our entire value chains perform both environmentally and socially. So we build measurement tools. They're called the Higg Index that helps all these companies here and the 200 brands, which I think we had flashing up on a slide before, measure their performance so they can drive towards positive impact in the supply chain.
Great, thank you, Betsy. So I've also asked the three other panelists, some of the companies may be more familiar to you than others, but I challenged them to give us a 2-minute overview. I'm a professor, so I can stare at them meanly when they're going over 2 minutes, just to give us a sense of the companies that you work for and some of the innovative sustainability initiatives that you are leading. So, Colleen?
Okay, so 2 minutes, here I go. I talk fast, so keep up. Timberland has been a very thoughtful company for a long time. Our heritage and our longstanding history with sustainability and responsibility dates back more than 25 years. So things like making it better in terms of our products, the outdoors, and the communities have been a part of our ethos and our DNA for generations. So some quick examples on how we think about that and things that we're doing currently around those three things. So with respect to product, we have environmental product standards that span across all of our product categories. And this really started from something that was kicked off back in 2007 when we were challenged to prove that it can be done. And really it was this woman right here who helped the company think about, don't tell us it can't be done. Back in 2007, what we kept hearing was that you can't build a product, you can't make a sustainable apparel or footwear garment at a price point that your consumers are going to be willing to pay for, that can withstand its performance expectations, and you can have the style that our consumers are demanding. And so Betsy worked hard with our company and our designers and developers to prove that theory wrong. And the Earthkeeper boot was born. That Earthkeeper boot was so successful that it ended up morphing over 80% of our footwear products, ended up being products that met those environmental standards. So with that, we said, you know what? It's not just about one product line. It's about how we do business. And we had built the infrastructure behind the scene to make that happen. So now today, we have environmental product standards across all of our product categories, footwear, apparel, our pro business, all of our accessories. That's what we're doing within product. Within outdoors, we've had a long-standing history of planting trees at a large scale in primarily three different locations, the Horchan Desert in China, in the Dominican Republic where we have a manufacturing plant, and then also in Haiti. But for Timberland, it wasn't just about planting trees and cleaning up our hands and throwing some water on that tree and walking away. We really wanted to think about, when we got to the needs of Haiti, to think about how can planting trees actually end up creating a situation where we provide economic opportunity and social impact as well as the environmental impact. And so from that was born an agroforestry model that we partnered with a Smallholder Farmers Alliance, where now 3,200 farmers are raising, yields have increased over 50% and their incomes have increased over 40% as a result of planting trees with their agricultural products. Version 2.0 of that is now we're looking to replicate that model again in Haiti, but to connect it to an agricultural product that is a commodity that we source, organic cotton. So we're going to help some smallholder farmers in Haiti reintroduce the organic cotton industry to their backyard and to help them have a livelihood, economic livelihood, and social impact as well. With respect to community, like I said, we've been at this for 25 years. For 25 years, our company has had an employee volunteering benefit program where our employees are paid up to 40 hours of annual leave each year to go out and give back to their community. So we're excited to be celebrating our 25th anniversary of that program this year.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Colleen.
That might have been 3 minutes. Sorry.
Yeah, I was. It's okay. All right, Stuart. Challenge to make it shorter.
I'll try to make up for that. If I told you I work for W.L. Gore, most of you would look at me going, who? The company that's most well known for Gore-Tex is actually, that's only about a quarter of what we do. We make a large array of things from heart implants to stents to dental floss, filters for mercury, burning coal plants to catch the mercury, and a large array of other things, all based around one technology. It's a privately owned company, mostly owned by the family, so heavily imbued with the family's values, which are be good stewards of our environment. And it starts with taking care of the local communities, but also our philosophy is around making things that last, that we can use for a long time. And it does go back quite a long way when we started looking at our environmental impact. 20 years ago, we started measuring it using life cycle assessments. We started using glues without VOCs. 10 years later, in the late 90s, we tried to create a circular economy system for our jackets, which failed abysmally for tons of different reasons. Then we tried to, and we were a bit more successful, thankfully, to manage the chemicals that we use and input into our products using several different certifications, so to the point that Vincent was making. And we're moving along slowly, arguably not fast enough, but we're always trying to improve the way we make things and still provide that same level of performance.
Perfect, thank you. So Amy, tell us a little more about Eileen Fisher.
All right, so Eileen Fisher is a women's clothing company based just north of New York City, and we were founded 33 years ago with a commitment to natural fibers, and at that time it seemed like that might be enough. But what we learned over the years was certainly that's not enough, and we tried a lot of different things over the years. Back in the early 90s, we tried making things out of recycled plastic soda bottles, which at the time seemed kind of revolutionary, not so much anymore. We tried making cotton out of cotton that's grown in colors, don't need any dye, but that didn't sell very well. So, you know, mostly we were kind of just sailing along, trying different things. And then 5 years ago, Eileen took a supply chain trip, Eileen Fisher, the person, and came back completely transformed. And she said, we've got to do more. We're not doing enough. We're not going fast enough. And so we came out with a whole new set of goals that completely transformed how we look at our clothing now, how we look at our product, how we look at our processes, how we look at our supply chain, how we look at the people in the supply chain, how we think about the future. And so some examples of that are, we agreed, going back 2 years, we set ourselves a whole lot of very specific goals that have a lot of 100% and a lot of zeros in them. So an example was, we were going to, by the year 2020, have all of our cotton be organic, all of our linen be organic, and use zero viscose, completely eliminate the bad rayon from our supply chain, which was super scary because our sales team was not consulted. And when they found out that we were going to, by the year 2020, eliminate the product that constituted 20% of our total sales volume without any kind of viable replacement identified yet, they were really worried. So we're still working really hard at identifying that replacement. But the good news is we're going to achieve some of our other goals early. Some of the other things that we're working on, though, back in 2009, we started to take back our previously worn clothes. We started asking our customers to bring back clothes that they weren't going to use anymore, the Eileen Fisher clothes. And the original reason for that was so that we could start creating a fund to fund women's and girls programs. So we thought we'd take it back, we resell it, and we'll have some money to give away to nonprofits. What we found out was this was a really cool business plan, and we've taken back now since 2009 over 700,000 pieces, purely Eileen Fisher clothes. Half of it is being resold or repaired and resold. The other half is not sellable because it's in such bad shape, but that's okay because we're investing in many technologies out there that are working on recycling, regenerating the fiber. And we're also creating a new line called Remade in the USA that's going to be launched this fall. It's taking the old clothes and repurposing it. I'm wearing a piece right here, which has been over-dyed with natural dyes, and creating a whole new line of really cool limited edition pieces. So stay tuned on that.
Very cool. So I'm going to pose a question to all of our panelists. So all companies, no matter whether they're public or private, they're responsible to their owners and their investors for helping create financial value, financial returns. Conventional wisdom has held that growth in financial returns is driven in part, right, by selling more stuff. Yet that idea that is so inherent in our capitalist system isn't really aligned with the environmental sustainability values that you've all just described. Vincent's colleague from Patagonia, Rick Ridgway, wrote a very provocative article a few years ago called The Elephant in the Room. Namely, that growth is not sustainable. And it's pretty clear to me, and I think many others, that we aren't going to solve this conundrum by simply doing the same stuff that corporations have been doing for the last 100 years, and then expecting some kind of different outcome in terms of the environmental impact. And I think it's pretty clear as well that corporations will need to do things differently moving forward. So I wanted to sort of pose that as a question to all of you. How do we think about this sort of elephant in the room, that we can't just keep selling more stuff? And what do you think is the next frontier of sustainability? Anyone can jump in.
So this is something that we think about often, and not just within Timberland, but within the industry and within VF Corporation. Timberland is one of 35 brands that are owned by VF Corporation. So our sister companies, the North Face, Vans, Reef, Wrangler, Lee Jeans, we get together quite a bit and think about these kinds of problems. And not only is it the story of stuff and the disposal of things, but it's also the resources that it takes to make all this stuff. But it's also this new trend about experiences. And consumers aren't necessarily the consumers that we had 5 years ago, and definitely not 10 years ago. And they don't want all that stuff that we've all accumulated. Rather, it's more of a, how do we think about our business in different ways? Circular economy is a very big buzzword right now. But how do you find it to be a tangible way for your business? And for Timberland, what we've done a couple of things in the past. So one was we actually designed and sold a boot that was intentionally designed for disassembly. So it was a boot that at the end of its life, you could return it to Timberland, and there was a secret little passage that only certain people knew where to find it, a little string that you would pull and the boot would fall apart. And then all of the pieces could be repurposed and made into a new boot. Problem: we make really good quality boots. None of those boots have yet been returned. Oh, Stu is wearing a pair of our design for disassembly. Excellent. So when they are done, Stu is going to return them, and we're going to have new boots made out of them. But
I'm going to have them resold.
You'd probably be worth more. So that's one of our attempts that we did. Another thing that we think about is, okay, not only do we want to make sure that we make very durable, high-quality products that will last as long as they possibly can, but then in terms of what we put into our products, how do we make sure that we find a circular way to incorporate more new life for other materials? Timberland tires, for example. We just launched, yes, Timberland actually sells tires. So if you're in the market for new tires on your car, I challenge you to tell your tire supplier to find you the Timberland tires. So at the end of their life, they have a dedicated supply take-back chain of custody, and they will then end up as outsoles for our shoes. So again, good quality tires. It's going to take a little while for this to happen, but we expect by 2020, if not sooner, we will have the first pair of shoes that have outsoles made from our tires.
That's awesome. Thank you. Amy, you're also doing some sort of interesting stuff in the circular economy. You sort of touched upon your new Fisher Found initiative. Can you maybe talk a little bit more about how you're thinking about this idea of the circular economy?
Well, I would just say that we think of clothing in five stages, really. There's the first quality, but once it comes back to us, we think of it in four levels. There's reworn, so it's clean, it's in perfect condition. All it has to do is be cleaned and we can resell it. There's repaired, I think is the second one, or renewed, and that's when it has to be repaired and then resold. There's remade, which is the thing I just described to you. So we're cutting up old clothes and we're remaking something beautiful out of it. And then there's the last one is regenerated. So that's grinding the old clothes up and turning it into new fiber and creating something new out of that. My personal feeling, though, is, that's just one way to kind of reduce the waste on the earth, textile waste, but it's not going to be enough because we're still going to have waste in the long run. And I say I have this thing that I use internally. I talk about this. So we're situated as a company. Our headquarters are situated right on the Hudson River in the Hudson Valley, north of New York City, and we see this water, the flow up and down all day long, every single day. And I feel like, what if one day, we use biomimicry as an inspiration, we were able to take the clothing we no longer wanted or it was no good anymore, we could throw it in the river and it could degenerate, not just disappear, but it could actually feed the fish. So it could become food for the fish. So that's true, death to life, life to death, kind of full circle. That would be my ultimate vision one day. I haven't yet completely convinced people inside the company, but I think it's possible. I think Vince wants to say something about this.
No, I think that's a good model for thinking about the growth question, because when we talk about growth in businesses as though it were exponential, and that it would go on forever, when in fact if you do mimic life, living things grow and living things decay. And life is also made up of systems, so companies grow and some companies decline. And the more we start to think about that in terms of the circle of life rather than I've got to just increase sales by 10% every year, I think the more we'll find answers to the questions that you raised, Fiona.
Thank you. Anybody else want to jump in on this conundrum I posed?
I think there's another way of looking at it, because we're still talking about making more stuff, and Colleen touched onto this with the word about experiences. Most people go skiing 1 week a year, and will end up having to buy ski pants, ski jackets, gloves, whatever, for that 1 week a year. There is a different way of looking at it, and that's rental. Call it service economy, call it whatever you like, but it's about using the jacket, not owning it. Do you want to own a jacket, or do you actually want to be able to go outside and stay dry? That's what most people want. By providing that kind of service, we can increase the revenue of the company and spectacularly decrease the impact that we're having on the environment, because instead of 10 jackets to 10 people, we only rent one for 10 people. And if we can design those products to disassemble or decay at the end of their lifetime, then we're really taking a big step forward.
Wow, it's an exciting vision. Pretty cool. Betsy? No. All right. She can't. She's married to him, so she's not going to try and top him. That's good. Smart move, Betsy. All right. So I have a couple of questions that I wanted to pose. I have this sort of secret ambition to, have a talk show on NPR. So bear with me. These sound like hard-hitting questions, and they are a little bit. But I did get permission from the panelists to ask them ahead of time. So Amy, Eileen Fisher. Eileen Fisher's doing some amazing things. You've talked about some of those things, but yet 65% of Eileen Fisher's product is made in China. How's that sustainable?
Oh, you've got your hand on your hip. You're really challenging me. So here's the thing. We make, last year we made 70% of our clothes in China and 20% in the United States. So we're finally beginning to see the pendulum start to swing back. We're now 25% US, 65% China, and a little bit in a few other countries. We live in a global economy. The way we look at it, we have to make our clothes in the place where it's the best place, where we have enough labor, we have the highest skilled labor, and where we have the capacity to meet our needs. We're a smallish. I think we're the smallest, for sure, the smallest company on the panel, and yet here in New York, here in the United States, the size of the factories are not big enough to accommodate everything that we need to make. And the skill set in the United States is not nearly of the quality and of the level that we get in China. So there's a piece about, right now, we have to go where we have the ability to make what we need. The other thing is, when we think about silk, a lot of our clothes that we make are silk. The silk is grown or raised, silkworms and spun in China, and then turned into clothing, all within a 100-mile radius. So we think of the whole local footprint as a story and as a way to contain the impact. Rather than sending it halfway around the world 2 or 3 times from spinner to weaver to sewer, et cetera, we try to keep things contained. So for us, that's a sustainability story. And we're far from being perfect. We know we have a lot of work to do. We are trying to bring more back to the States. But even in bringing things back to the States, the fiber is still coming from another country, or 2 or 3 other countries if it's a blend. So there's no easy answer to that.
Documented. So given your environmental values, why don't you use vegan materials to make more of your product?
We would love to, quite frankly. The reality is that we are entertaining suppliers to provide us alternatives all the time. We welcome that. To date, it's not even about a cost comparison. It's about having a product that's an alternative to leather that meets the breathability, the durability, and the aesthetic appeal to it. It's very challenging to find that combination. But we've entertained things like pineapple leather. We welcome any opportunity to look at alternatives. And I look forward to that day where that can be solved for. And our innovation team is focused on trying to solve for that problem as well. It's a limited resource. It impacts our climate. So in the meantime, what we're focusing on now is trying to help others in the industry, partnering with our sister VF brand, Wrangler, in working with their consumer segment in the United States, the ranching community, and raising awareness about the new science that's out there now with respect to soil health. And how can we incorporate better sustainable grazing practices and better sustainable agricultural practices to promote soil health. 96% of our hides, while we have tanneries all over the world, 96% of the hides that these tanneries source for us are coming from the United States. So if we could just influence the sustainable grazing practices here in the United States, it would have a huge impact for at least for our products on the climate. And I think that will be a growing trend.
Yeah, really interesting. And I can't help but think, we're a research-intensive university here at UNH, and Stuart, Colleen, Amy, they're all highlighting challenges that faculty and students at UNH could help solve, right? So there's a challenge to everyone in the room. We can be partners to companies like this in helping them solve these really hard technical challenges. Betsy, question for you. So you talked about the Higg Index, which is one of the things that the Sustainable Apparel Coalition has pioneered. And that's an incredible move forward to help people understand the sort of how their product is made and create greater transparency. Just by a show of hands, how many of you in this room have heard of the Higg Index? We're a good campus here. Nice job. But how many have not heard of the Higg Index before? All right, probably a little bit more. So how can the SAC really ensure that the Higg Index moves the needle when lots of consumers of apparel in the audience have never even heard of it?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I don't know if the Higg Index is going to empower you in the next few years to actually make informed purchasing decisions. But what I do know it will do in the next few years is empower at least 200 of the most influential brands in the world to get greater transparency internally into what they're doing, what they don't even know they're doing right now that might be good or bad from a sustainability or social labor standpoint. And by getting them to, or opening up that box a little bit more on these complex supply chains and helping them identify opportunities that have win-wins for their business, I think that will be kind of the first stage in actually moving the needle. But I do want to say that all this information, these measurement tools, the Higg Index, it's allowing companies to evaluate the performance of their products, but the intention is to make it consumer-facing. So until we educate and get that message out there with whether it be product labels or other consumer information, do know that is a goal of ours, is to make that information transparent to you so you can one day make purchasing decisions based on all your traditional criteria, price, performance, aesthetics, but also sustainability information, labor conditions, et cetera.
Thank you very much. Well, we want to turn it over to all of you. I'm sure there's some great questions in the audience. So if you have a question, my colleague down here. Oh, okay, we have two students here who will have one microphone. So if you have a question you'd like to ask, put up your hand, and one of our students will get that microphone to you. Oh, you need my microphone. All righty, okay. All right, thank you. Okay, in the front row.
Yeah. So I guess I have sort of a broader question. I'm just wondering, as companies who are working towards sustainability, and you have all these wonderful goals, in terms of government, legislation, EPA, all the things that are going on, I know we're focused on the apparel industry. Does that make your jobs easier, harder? Do you push forward anyway, even with things that might be going on in different administrations?
Great question.
There's a lot of fear right now around what could happen related, especially for those of us who import more than we make domestically, which is most apparel companies. We know that costs are going to go up, and the group that's going to suffer the most are the people in the supply chain, because that's where traditionally savings have been found. And so we're really concerned about that, because we don't want that to happen. So for us, that's our biggest fear. We also just in general are very active politically. We do a lot of advocacy work on climate issues, et cetera. So we try to influence positive change.
I think this is how is the Sustainable Apparel Coalition responding? Because we have a big political change in the U.S., but there's also a changing climate in Europe that affects the industry across the planet.
Yeah, I guess I'd say that the flip side is in Europe, there's a positive change. There's much more focus, given recent events like factory collapses in Bangladesh, on improved transparency and accountability. So there actually are proposed regulatory schemes in the by the European Commission right now to force companies to transparently communicate social and environmental conditions on their products. And the coalition, we're actually actively involved in testing out what that looks like, both developing the methodology, how do you measure this stuff, but then also how do you present that information to consumers. So we are trying to ride that positive train towards increasing transparency of these impacts to consumers. So I guess I'd share that positive story.
Stu, you want to jump in?
I think there's something that's really important. It's that markets are global, and you don't make several sets of products. You make one that goes to the highest standards. So that's like the positive thing. We'll carry on anyway because we have to. But I'd be lying if I'd say that it won't have an impact in very different ways.
Do you all see that it's your as a company, a for-profit company? To what degree do you engage with sort of around public policy issues? Is it your job?
Yes.
Yes.
But I think I think it's important for companies to, when they're communicating with customers, to talk about things they know. I mean, right after the Trump inauguration, people were asking us at Patagonia about our immigration policy. And yeah, we could have an opinion, but that's not what we know.
Sure.
We do know a lot about bear's ears. We do know a lot about saving wild places, and we do know a lot about making a difference in the supply chain. So I think it's great for companies to be engaged, but we'll lose credibility if we start to talk
About things you're
on
not
things that we're
credible, and
we're not credible.
yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Other questions from the audience? Yes.
Regarding the UNH students here, what advice can you give us if we want to pursue a career in this field, or if we want to promote this kind of ideals here at UNH?
Great question.
Well, I don't know if I'm the best person to answer that. I didn't go to school here, but we get asked that question. I get asked that question in a lot of different environments, and I speak at a lot of different universities. It really starts from within, right here. And I think Alex is a perfect example of that. That one person said, you know what, I don't like what I'm seeing around here, and I think I have an idea. And he acted on that idea. So as long as you have that in your heart and you have that willingness to take a risk and to take a stand on something, you can apply that in your personal life and your professional life. You don't necessarily have to have a true sustainability job to make a difference and have a role in this work. I'd actually advocate that we have people who have that passion personally to take other kinds of roles in companies. Because until it gets embedded and infused in a company fully, and it's not just the charge of a sustainability company, we're really just not moving the needle enough. So that's my answer.
We were talking about this earlier, that if we're actually successful, our role will be extinct very shortly. That would mean sustainability is integrated in the business. And honestly, like, if I want to be real about it, our business model, the apparel industry business model right now for globally sourcing product, it's you guys are probably going to make it extinct. I actually hope you do. So I would say success and what your role could be would actually be at looking at how to do things entirely differently than this antiquated apparel industry that we have right now. Create something entirely different than what we've done.
The other thing about a working life is that 90% of it is chores. So you really want to choose something that's going to give you back for that 10% is going to be very powerful in your life. So you really want to do work that personally engages you and that you're also respected for, that is more than sustainability. So, go, if you're interested in marketing, you're interested in ops or finance, or you're interested in starting a group that reduces waste on campus, have that in mind rather than just sustainability, because just doing good is not satisfying enough.
Yeah, I completely support that and go further to say that you don't want a job in sustainability. You want a job in marketing where you can input sustainability. You want a job in purchasing where you can put sustainability. You want a job in accounting where you can put sustainability. I have a background in finance, nothing to do with sustainability, but I can do that.
Yeah, thank you very much. Great question. Other questions from the audience? Oh, yes, all the way over there. Thank you so much. 1 second, wait for the microphone. Thank you.
Hi, I don't need a microphone.
Oh, you're better with it. You're much better with it.
Yeah, so I'm that majority of the room that doesn't know what the Higgs index is, but as a consumer, what parameters does the Higgs index use? How do I see that when I'm shopping for a product?
Great
Thank
question.
you.
Yeah.
I didn't have too much time in my 2 minutes to explain a very technical and geeky thing, but it's the Higg Index is not consumer facing right now. It's a tool used by the members of the Sustainable Apparel Coalition to quantify environmental impacts from raw material extraction through finished product, transportation and logistics, retail operations, brand operations through end of use, and closed loop systems. So it's actually like a really geeky scientific tool that's broken up into bits for different audiences. So we have a version of the Higg Index for product designers, people like Pete Langford from Timberland. We have a material sustainability tool meant for people that source materials to rank and evaluate what are the best materials from an environmental standpoint. We have a tool for supply chain managers who want to figure out what are the best factories to source from an environmental and social perspective. And there's a lot more information about the tools and the specific methodology for how we capture all this information and rank it on our website, which is apparelcoalition.org, or if you just look up Higg Index. And I'm happy to geek out with any of you guys that are interested in that stuff later. Just figured I'd spare you.
And by 2025, we expect some kind of legal framework for environmental labeling on products, on consumer products within the EU. So we'll be needing the Higg Index and those tools. And to come back to the question about what you should look at if you want to work in sustainability, maybe measuring environmental impact and having some kind of knowledge around the tools and the legislative frameworks that relate to that is a good place to start because it's coming.
Very cool. Thank you. Question, let's see. One over here. Yep.
Okay. Where are you?
Right here.
Okay. So I listened to a panel a couple of weeks ago about sustainable fashion as well, and I was surprised to hear that the brands were saying that they don't use their sustainability as a competitive differentiator. As someone who works in communications, I was really surprised to hear that because there are studies showing that consumers are looking for that in their products. So I was curious, so I asked them why, and they just said it was due to greenwashing by other companies that were using it as a disingenuous marketing tool. I'm curious to see what you guys have to say about that and if you find that's a competitive differentiator for you.
So that's so interesting because I've never heard other brands say that. So I'm really interested because we have always said that about ourselves. We have a very quiet leader in Eileen Fisher, and for many years she did not want to mislead our customers into thinking that we were talking about this other aspect of our clothes in order to sell it. We wanted our customers to come in and buy our clothes because of how they look, feel, fit, etc. Well, what we learned was over the years, some of our customers actually started asking questions and they wanted more information. And so we then started to talk about it very recently, last 5 years or so in our advertising. And at the same time, most of our customers still are not coming in and saying, looking for something organic or I'm looking for something fair trade. They're really coming in because they want the right, look, feel, fit. And if it has a value that they relate to, it's the icing on the cake and it makes them feel even better. So frankly, the marketing, I don't know that I would say that it really helps sell the clothes. Anytime we've put like a sustainability message in our advertising, we haven't noticed a bump in sales. But it just, for us, just makes people feel better about buying it.
My favorite story along these lines is that Nissan heroically tried to market the Leaf for about 10 years, and it didn't sell. And they really were committed until Tesla came along and made the electric vehicle sexy. And in our case, we know that people don't buy a rain jacket to save the world; they buy a rain jacket to keep dry. And if it's also made as thoughtfully with as minimal harm as possible, then that's a great secondary point. The other thing, just the third point on that, is the Sustainable Apparel Coalition actually enables all of these companies to do this work at a pre-competitive level so that we can come to agreements without presenting competing claims into the marketplace. So I think it's much stronger to keep that out of the sales pitch. It's great to inform people, and everybody who wants to get informed will learn. But I think it's good to keep it, to not be really earnest. There was a great quote. I was at a panel. Somebody raised their hands to Seventh Generation and said, "I've been using your products since before they worked." and that is, that's a danger for any of us who are involved in it.
Yeah. Colleen?
We do see it as a differentiator. I think what we've done over the years is had different approaches in how we message it and different philosophies behind that. There were periods in time where our leadership felt like we shouldn't be patting ourselves on the back, and echoing Vincent and Amy's comments. And then in other times, we see consumer insights research that we do for our own consumer segments that are telling us that they want to buy products from a company that they trust. And they actually believe that we are a company that they can trust, but we don't know how they know that because we're not messaging it well. So I think there's a fine blend between, are you really marketing your green and your good, or are you just communicating and being transparent? And how do we create a level of information that's digestible to consumers in a way that isn't going to gloss over their eyes, and it also, on the flip side, isn't going to be just greenwashing. So that, again, is a role that the Sustainable Apparel Coalition will help companies like us solve. We have a design philosophy that's called SPG, Style, Performance, and Green. Every one of our designers sits down with that mantra in front of them. But the reality is that none of our competitors are out to make an unstylish product, and none of our competitors are out to make a product that doesn't perform. So it is the green that differentiates us from our competitive set. We do believe that.
Okay, I think we have time for one more question. Yeah, Jill. in the beautiful Patagonia sweatshirt.
In a society where it seems like places like Walmart are like the most affordable and ready available places to shop, how do you recommend that, especially like students, can be responsible consumers?
Nice call to action. Thank you.
One of the things I often say is I can't afford to buy cheap stuff. Because if you buy a cheap rain jacket, it'll probably fail within 2 weeks or 2 months, and you'll go out and buy another one. And you won't buy the cheap one the second time around, you'll buy the expensive one. So you might as well buy the expensive one at the start and actually save money. And you can do that, you can replicate that on t-shirts. Do you want a $3 t-shirt that you'll have to buy or rebuy because it's out of fashion, because it's fallen apart, because it doesn't look good? Or you're going to spend $25 on a t-shirt. It's about quality, not quantity.
Oh, and I often talk about investing in clothes. The way you would invest in your telephone or your car, you take care of it. So we encourage people to buy what you love and treat it like an investment and take care of it for years. And it won't go out of style and it will last. And, you wear things that have been worn before.
It's that last part. I mean, that's what we're trying to do with Worn Wear. We're going to create a site on our website to sell used clothing. Stuart, your idea about leasing a jacket, I think what we need to do are look at different economic models that make it possible for people to have high quality gear, rather than say, okay, for people who don't have money, we're going to give them the cheap stuff, because that's the stuff that doesn't last and creates more environmental damage.
So I just want to put it into context. There's a statistic out there that says that since the year 1990, compared to the year 1990, Americans now buy 5 times as much clothing as we did then. That's not that long ago, 5 times as much, and a vast majority of it goes to landfill. I live in a house that was built in 1926, and there's one original closet in that house, and it takes up it's about 2 feet by 3.5 feet. And it used to be that was plenty big enough for a week's worth of clothing. How many items of clothing do you wear at one time, right? But I've just now my husband and I just enlarged our closet in our bedroom because it wasn't big enough. It's ridiculous. It's embarrassing. And because we just we have too much stuff. And so, is it possible for us to return to the age when we had just what we needed and no more than that? I don't know.
Yeah. The average American throws away 82 pounds of clothes every year.
80% ends in landfill, which is really a tragedy, since most clothes, when they're discarded, can be worn by somebody else.
So we've heard from some amazing companies tonight, and it's no secret, right, that our planet and our world, our society is facing some very significant environmental and social challenges, and those are getting bigger. When we think about who's going to solve those problems, the traditional response is the public sector, or perhaps the nonprofit NGO sector. And they are an important part of the solution for sure. But when you look at the magnitude, if you compare the revenues of private corporations around the world to the spending of the public sector and the nonprofit sector, private corporations, for-profit companies dwarf the spending of the other sectors. And so my belief is that we have to have the private sector, we have to have for-profit companies being part of the solution, and because of the magnitude of their revenues, they are the ones, in addition to us as consumers, that can really start to drive change in the world. So I'm incredibly thrilled that we have companies and leaders like the ones you've heard from tonight that are making a difference. And I just want to put our hands together to say a huge thank you to all of these companies.